Hi, everyone. Welcome to Kitchen Conversations. My name is Representative April Berg, and I am excited to have you in my kitchen on this Tuesday afternoon to have a conversation about education. I could not be more thrilled to have the amazing educational thought leader, advocate, activist, consultant, Erin Jones with us today. I would not do her justice introducing her. And so Erin is a longtime friend and a two-time now guest on Kitchen Conversations. Erin, why don't you let folks know what you're up to right now?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. The show. I see this like the Oprah show. I've always had a dream to be on the Oprah show, so I get to be on the April show. So thanks for having me here. I am a Jackie of all trades right now. So I'm doing some consulting work around DEI stuff, mostly with schools still, but early learning. Actually, I have an early learning training this afternoon. So early learning, K-12, higher ed, but then also businesses, nonprofits, government, because those all intersect with schools. So one of the things I love right now is that I am working with every institution that touches the child, doing DEI work, but I'm also doing a lot of school assemblies. So over this last year, there weren't a lot of public speakers that had figured out the online thing. But of course, when the pandemic hit, I went online and did 83 days in a row of online teaching for free. And people saw me there. And so I got
Wow.
invited to speak all over the country this last year. So I have a classroom of students. I teach every Monday night, every Wednesday, I help facilitate a class. And then every Friday, one of my friends, Fernell Miller, and I teach a multi-generational class for an hour to kids from actually children and their parents. So we have the youngest child was 4, and we have an 84-year-old in our class. So we talk about identity and all the events of
Yeah.
the year, from the racial tension to elections to all of that. We help people think about how do we need to be thinking about? How do we respond to this? Really, how do we think critically about this? And I also am an author. Well, I will soon author. I wrote a book about all of this and stories and strategies to talk about race. That will be out in about 2.5 weeks. So that's what I'm
Awesome.
doing. All the things, all kinds of things.
So you're not keeping busy at all. Is that what we're telling listeners? It's like you're just kind of hanging out,
Not at all.
just little
Not at
stuff.
all.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
No,
bored.
I just get energized listening to, like you said, you are in every space that touches a student, and that is amazing. It's important, it's needed. That's why folks keep calling you because I think your voice is it's always powerful, but right now it's so necessary. And, like I mentioned before, this is the second time that you've been on Kitchen Conversations, and we had a great conversation about education. And this was kind of midst of the height of the pandemic, and education was looking really different in a lot of different ways. And we kind of landed the plane on educational reform, the need to change how we do education. And so now that we're in this moment of more changes, more talks about education, how to do it, um, race. We're going to unpack that a little bit later in the conversation. But how do you feel? How do you feel the landscape of educational reform is shaping up?
So, one of the questions that I ask in every education space I'm in, whether I'm talking with young people or adults, because it's something I'm really worried about, I actually believe there's a lot that we have learned about education over the last year and a half. I think there's a lot of things that we've learned about technology, about how to use technology, about teaching history differently,
Hmm.
about engaging our family and community differently, about leveraging Zoom and Microsoft Teams to connect students to opportunities in other states and other districts. And so one of the questions that I end almost every talk with is, okay, if you could keep one or two things from the last year and a half, what would they be? Because I worry that when we go
Yeah,
back
that's
to in
good.
person, we're going to snap back to what was. And I think
Yeah.
that's actually really dangerous because we will have missed the opportunity to hold on to some things that I think are really necessary. So there's that. And then I always ask people, what have you learned about yourself or the system that we need to stop doing? That we need to not
Wow.
repeat once we're back in
Yes.
school. And so I think there's lots of learning. And I think every district is a little bit different. I think our small rural communities have a really different learning than our big urban centers. Places with lots of diversity, ethnic diversity, have different responses than places that are predominantly white. But I think we need to take some time, especially over the summer, to really interrogate what has happened over the last year and a half. What can we learn? And I worry that if we don't take the time to do that, we will have missed possibly one of the best opportunities in my history. I just turned 50,
Mhm.
so I've been around a long time, and I think we will
Wow.
have missed a once in a lifetime opportunity to shift things.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because it's an important question to ask, right? Like what do we want to keep from the lessons that we've learned, and what do we want to do differently? And I see it myself in education spaces, that tendency to go back to what we know. There's another tendency out there that I think is equally as dangerous as that, which is this deficit language. And I've heard it said by educational leaders, ones that I respect. I've heard it said by parents. I've heard it said by just folks from soup to nuts in the educational space. Learning loss. We've lost something. We have to catch up. The kids are lost. We have to get them back on track. And so talk to me a little bit. Talk to our viewers a little bit about the dangers of deficit language and the myth of the learning loss.
Well, let me just frame it first by saying I'm a linguist. So I speak four
Mm,
languages. Language to me is really important. And so I've always avoided words like students like at risk to students. I think it's dangerous. Dropout students.
yeah.
I think we push out students. So let's, as a system, take responsibility for ourselves, pushing kids out. Students have promise. Every child has promise. And so
Yes.
why is that connected to learning loss? Because the words that we speak to the potential or lack thereof that we have for our students. And so when I hear learning loss, I hear a lot of people associate learning loss with brown children. And I'm like,
Mm,
yo, I've been teaching brown children for the last year and a half. So I was not a regular classroom teacher, but when everything went online, I just opened my Zoom and I had a bunch of black and brown. Most of my students are black and brown students. If they're not black and brown, they're poor white students. And um, I'll tell you what, they learned more in the last year and a half than
yes.
they have learned in their lives. A lot of them said, we learn more about ourselves, our learning style, our
Hmm.
identities, our history. We learn more about different authors than we had ever learned in our career in K-12. So I
Yeah.
think we need to stop saying the learning loss because who are we comparing ourselves to? So
Thank you.
everyone's been in a pandemic. So nobody's had like a normal year of school. Who are we comparing ourselves to and why this competition? Like, let's just meet students where they are. Let's make sure they're learning stuff. Let's make sure when we go back to school in the fall that we don't spend that first month trying to get kids caught up academically before we
Yeah.
meet them where they are and make sure that they are well. I want
Yes.
to make sure they are healthy. They're mentally and emotionally healthy before we start trying to pile on a bunch of work to get them caught up to some fake standard that we just made up out of somewhere.
Well, and I'm glad you keep it real, right? I mean, that's real talk. And I think that what you're talking about, those standards, right? Those are, they're arbitrary. Those are very subjective, and they are standards that are placed differently. We have 295 districts in our state, and every one of them under local control has a different set of standards. Same basic state requirements, but a different set of standards. And so I really want folks to hear that this deficit language is dangerous. Everybody's in the same boat, and we need a tide to lift all of our boats, right? And trying to say that some of the kids are being left behind, it's are we leaving them behind is probably a better question. So thank you for that explanation. And I think part of that too is, when you said you opened up your Zoom camera and kids were there to learn and taught. So those kids showed up the way they
They
were,
chose
and
to come. They
they
chose to
chose to
come
come. Exactly. And that's
on their
how,
own time. On their own time. They are still
yes.
coming. School is out, and those children are
And
still
they're still
coming. They will
showing
be in
up.
my classroom tomorrow night. They'll be in my classroom on Friday. Yes.
So that brings me to another issue, right? Attendance. And next year, I've heard it from Mount High and on down, right? Butts and seats. Schools are going to be open, butts and seats, and the way you show up will be that traditional way. Now, I've talked to a lot of districts who are realizing that students do want a virtual option. They do want the ability to show up as they are. To your point, that might be all summer. So what are the conversations you're having as you're talking to districts and different educational leaders about having students, allowing students to show up as they are?
So my district, my husband is a high school teacher in Thurston School, North Thurston School District, so Lacey area. And we have created now a whole online school. So next year there will be an
Awesome.
option for students to go full online. They established that months ago and just have said,
Awesome.
we're just going to continue on with this process because there are students that have learned they just do better online. I
Absolutely.
just want to offer, as someone who's with students every week, none of my Black and brown students went back to school in person. Not one of them. Not one of them went back
Yeah.
to school in person. And the stories that I heard of these students who had been harassed online by
Yeah.
peers, harassed in a Zoom class in the chat by peers for being Asian, for being Black, for being LGBTQIA. They're like, no, we're not going back to school. I'm going to stay right in my house,
Yeah.
in my bed, doing school from here.
Yeah. And I've got to share with you, I talked with a parent, and I've talked to a lot of parents during this untraditional school year. And one parent, a Black parent, said to me that this was the first time her kids felt dignity. She used the word dignity in their education. And it, I mean, I just was struck, and it's kind of like a brick falling on your chest. You go, whoa, because you don't think of that, and think about, to your point, the harassment and how undignified that's, and how you're showing up the best you, and then you're being subjected to a variety of things that are making you feel like the worst you. So I think if we can allow, I'm glad to hear that about Thurston. I know our district up here in Everett, we're doing the same thing, allowing for an all virtual option for those who want to take it. I'm hoping that other districts are, and I'm hoping that, honestly, the parents, grandparents, community members, families that are out there listening, if your district isn't, please, reach out to them and ask for that option if that's something you need. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So now I gotta kind of move on to something that everybody's been talking about. And when we set out this time together, I honestly, it wasn't on my radar, because I think as educational leaders and leaders in racial justice, social justice, it's something that we think about and just do, and that's critical race theory, and just the foundation of a lot of really important work on anti-racism, anti-Black racism has been built on the decades and decades long body of work that would be considered critical race theory. So for the folks listening, Erin, can you just explain what is critical race theory?
So, first of all, it has become the boogeyman for all
Right,
things diversity and
right.
equity related. It has become the flashpoint and the boogeyman, and it's very intentionally people are misinformed by intention about
Mm-hmm.
what critical race theory is. So I'll tell you what it's not first, because I
Thank
just want
you.
to call out the things that are being said by very powerful national leaders about critical. So I want to call out what it's not. It is not a theory that says all Black people or all white people are bad people. That's not the point of it. The point is not to get all kids to hate themselves if they're white, or to get all Black kids to hate white people. That is not the point of critical race theory, um, which is being espoused by people like
Yeah,
Ted Cruz. Just had this video
I
about that was
know.
so damaging. So one of the things that Ted Cruz says, and I'm going to call him out because as a leader, you have a responsibility to speak life into people. And what he
Yes.
spoke was death, and it was untruth. One of the things he said about critical race theory is that it sends a message that America is irredeemably racist, irredeemably racist. And so, for those of you that don't like big words, irredeemably means that we can't be fixed. And I would say that is incredibly problematic. The whole point of critical race theory is let's look at our past. So by the
Yeah.
way, even though it's become a flashpoint this year, critical race theory has been around since the 70s. So this is
Yes.
not a new thing. And it was
Thank
really
you.
founded by lawyers. So it was meant to be this like theoretical framework for
Yes.
academics and higher, not even like undergrad work, but lawyers and graduate work, talking about, okay, how do we look back at systems and how race has played
Mm-hmm.
a role and how systems have impacted different people in different ways. That is let's look critically at
Yes.
history through the lens of race and the implications of race. That's what it's. So for all of you out there who want your children to be critical thinkers,
Yeah.
I just need you to understand the whole point of critical race theory is let's be critical thinkers about how race is playing a role in systems. And it is not about hate.
Yes.
And in fact, I would argue that Kimberly Crenshaw is about love. It's about we
Thank
love
you.
this country so much and we want her to get better. And the only
Yes.
way to get better is if we're honest about our past, kind of like Germany,
Yes.
kind of like South Africa. If we're
Yes.
honest about our past and we're willing to say, oh, that redlining thing was bad. And there are still implications for today because
Yeah.
of redlining that happened into the 80s in some places. There are still implications for people today. Oh,
Exactly.
because of boarding schools for Native American students that didn't end until, again, the early 80s, there are
Yep.
implications for Native American children and students. Oh, because of the internment camps at the Puyallup Fairgrounds,
Yep.
there are implications for our Japanese and Asian American, right? And it's saying
Yep.
let's look at our history with a critical lens and think about where has this idea of race played a role in how people have experienced systems differently. And that's, and
Yeah.
by the way, y'all parents out there, we are not teaching kindergartners critical race theory.
Race theory. No.
You got to
In
have a
fact, it's not
graduate
taught
degree
K.
to understand the
Yes,
actual theory.
exactly. Thank you for that. It's not K through 12. It's not, it's nothing. There's no handbook called critical race theory being given out with your kindergarten backpack as you enter school. But, and I just kind of want to unpack one of your examples, right, about redlining and banking. And that would be a great example of if you applied critical race theory to something like banking, an institution that a bank you may work at. You know, you're a nice woman, man, you're a nice person working at a bank. Your bank might have a very racist past, right? And you might need to look critically at it so that it doesn't keep going down that path of redlining or denying certain folks home loans and business loans. That does not make you racist because your bank has a problematic racist past in terms of its lending practices. But do you need to understand it? Absolutely, because you should not duplicate that. So that's kind of, that's the difference between understanding the system while not maligning and impugning the individual that might be within the system. And as an educational leader, I will tell you, all day my kids are in and I'm in a system educationally that was not built by or for us, but we're in it trying to make it better. And so that's what we need to do by looking critically at it. So why are folks scared? I mean, like, I just got to ask you, right? So we're talking about it. This is clear. Why are folks scared of critical race theory?
So I want to go back to something I started with. It's the boogeyman. So
Mm,
when we look at when President Obama was elected, there were a lot of white people that voted for President Obama, and it was kind of this message that look, we've arrived. See, we're not racist anymore. As a country, we've elected a black man. But there's
mm,
always a backlash for every. I mean, even after the civil rights movement, anytime there's gains, there's a very significant backlash, and I really believe this is a backlash to that. This is a backlash to um, the Black Lives Matter movement. I think
yeah,
here's the deal. I think a lot of white people are afraid. I mean, you don't hear black and brown people complaining about critical race theory. You're hearing conservative, mostly white people complain about critical race theory, um, and I think people are really afraid. But here's what I would say to those people who are afraid. And I belong to an evangelical church that is predominantly white and conservative, and I would say this to the members of my church who also are terrified of this conversation. They are terrified to talk about race.
wow,
Period.
yes,
Period. They just don't want to talk about it. I would say to us that all great things require discomfort. All great things. And just the mere talk of race is not creating division. The division is already here, y'all.
yeah,
The division is
yeah,
here. Talking about it is not creating the division. It's like saying you go to the doctor and you have a lump on your breast, and you go to the doctor and the doctor says, we got to do a biopsy and see what that is. And it comes back and it's cancerous. Well, I could say I got a lump on my breast, but I'm just going to ignore it and I'm just going to go about my life because I don't really want to know. I'm too scared.
mm,
And then guess what? That lump turns into something that's inoperable, right? If you hold on,
mm-hmm,
that's where we are as a country. We got a lump in our breast and we're so scared that it may be cancerous that we're just like, I'm not going to go to the doctor. But here's the thing, once you
yeah,
call it a thing, once you know it's cancer, now we can get you treatment. And the reality is, most people that catch breast cancer early end up surviving. It's when you
yeah,
don't catch it early and it becomes stage 4. Right. And we're in stage 3 right now, y'all. We're in
Yeah.
stage 3.
Yeah.
And the doctor says we got a solution. We got to talk about it. Part of the solution is we got to call a thing, just like
Yeah.
AA. If you go to an AA meeting,
Yeah.
we say, you know what, I'm an alcoholic, and we're
You have
gonna
to
link
say it.
arms. We're gonna link arms with other people, and we're gonna get well, right? That's this. This country has racist foundations and we've got to
Yeah.
call it a thing. And it does not mean, y'all, that all white people are bad. It does not mean that. That's not what it means at
Hmm.
all. It means that we have foundations that are bad. And so you may be out there listening and say, oh, but my parents didn't have slaves, and I didn't
Yeah.
participate in redlining. Here's the deal. That may be very true for most people. That's true. And you have benefited, though. White people have benefited from the GI Bill. White people have benefited from having suburbs created directly for
Yeah.
them. You have been able to build wealth in ways that Black and Brown people haven't. And so, guess what? You get to be part of the solution. I don't want you to
Hmm.
feel guilty and
Absolutely.
ashamed of being white, but I do want you to be part. And guess what? I'm part of the solution too. I don't let
Yeah.
myself off the hook. I can be complicit
Absolutely.
in the problem too. So I am saying I'm not asking you to do what I'm not willing to do.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that's a great way to put it, as being part of the solution. And I think, to your point, why it's coming up now is because it's easier to say the boogeyman is critical race theory than to say the boogeyman is Black history or teaching Asian history in schools. And that's where we kind of come full circle. Where we have had the protest movements and the push for more ethnic studies and more real history in our schools. But that's not, it's probably distasteful to say anything against learning history. But if you can come up with a boogeyman, then that becomes a lot
Yes.
easier to get folks all riled up about. So we could do this all day, Erin. We're gonna eventually have to have a longer episode to really dig into some of these important educational topics. But one thing I want to just kind of really end with is moonshots. That's and for folks who have regularly listened to Kitchen Conversation, a moonshot is something that seems impossible but has now become necessary. So I got to ask you, in this time of education, educational reflection, what is your moonshot?
So, I mean, I just wrote a book. So my book will be out in a few weeks. And what it's about is the healing, our healing. It's Bridges to Heal Us, capital US, United States and us,
Nice.
like us as people.
Oh, nice.
Um, I really believe what I'm most excited about is I believe if we talk about the thing, we can heal it. And I'm excited about that. And I'm excited that I have 5 events a day. On average, I have 5 events a day all over
Wow.
the country. I am everywhere talking about this stuff. And even in the face of the critique around critical race theory, there are enough people that really want to have this conversation that I get jazzed about it. I get so excited. And I think if we can demystify this work, I think if we can help people press through their discomfort. So, one of the things I talk about a lot is let's move from safe spaces to brave spaces. I think we've been safe
Hmm.
for a long time, and safe really means we just don't talk about certain things. It's not actually safety, it's actually the opposite of safety. We've just learned, okay, if I'm in this space, I can talk about this. If I'm in this space, I can't talk about it. That's actually not safe. And I actually think that it's a false sense of safety. I think we need to
Yeah.
be brave. And so for me, when I look at this next moment in time, it's going to take some really courageous people to stand up and link arms with each other, Black and white and Native and Asian and Latinx. And we've got to link arms and share one another's stories and realize that we all have skin in the game. And when one of us is suffering, we are all suffering. And so when we can help the least of us get healthy, it's going to heal us all. It will benefit us all. It will be good for us all.
Thank you for that. That is, that's unfortunately having to be a moonshot, but really saying it, naming it, and healing. That has to be our focus as we move forward. Erin, I cannot thank you enough for coming on today to Kitchen Conversations and chopping it up with me on education, educational issues. I got to let viewers know we're going to be back next week at 3 o'clock. We're going to be with the amazing Jen Aldrich. She is a candidate for Bothell City Council, but we're going to be talking specifically about LGBTQ youth homelessness. This is an issue everybody needs to understand more about,
Mhm.
hear more about, and hear from somebody with some incredible just lived experience. So definitely tune in next week, 3 p.m., right here on your favorite social media channel. Erin, have a great rest of your day. And viewers at home, enjoy the sunshine. Thanks for watching Kitchen Conversation.